They told me the well was empty, but I had learned early that the things people dismiss the loudest often carry the heaviest truths. That morning, the fog lay thick over the village, curling around the edges of roofs, drifting through the skeletal trees, and pressing damp against my ankles. Each breath I drew was heavy with mist, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and something older, something I could almost remember but couldn't place. The well waited at the edge of the field, dark stone rising from the gray like a sentinel, holding its secrets. I felt its presence before I saw it, as though the air itself had thickened around that one spot. My fingers itched to touch the rim, cold and slick beneath the dew, and I shivered not from the chill, but from the sense that something long hidden was stirring, waiting for me to notice. The letter arrived without warning, resting against the worn wooden threshold of my front door. Its corners were damp, curling slightly from the mist that had drifted in overnight, and the edges were frayed as though it had traveled a long distance through rain and time. The envelope felt heavy, more substantial than it should have been, as though it carried not just paper but the weight of memories long hidden. I hesitated for a moment before reaching down. My fingers brushed the flap gently, reluctant to disturb it. The texture was odd, rough in some places, soft where moisture had softened the fibers. There was a faint mustiness to it, a mixture of damp paper, ink, and something almost earthy, like the scent of soil after a rain. My hand recoiled slightly, not out of fear, but out of recognition. This letter was deliberate, insistent, patiently waiting for me to notice it, for me to take it in. The handwriting was familiar and yet foreign. Curves of letters I thought I had memorized twisted in unfamiliar ways, the loops and lines hesitant in some places, bold in others. I studied it as one studies a face half forgotten, trying to recall where I had seen it before. The name on the flap was absent, just initials, looping and curling like a quiet signature. I pressed my thumb against the envelope, feeling the indentation of each line, wondering who had written it and why it had come now. I carried it inside slowly, as if the motion itself might awaken something sleeping in the corners of the house. My boots pressed softly against the damp floorboards, each creak sharp in the quiet of the morning. The house smelled faintly of last night's rain seeping in through the cracks in the windows and the mustiness of old wood that had soaked up years of stories. The curtains were half drawn, pale light filtering through them in thin stripes, dust motes floating lazily like tiny ghosts caught in the beams. I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope resting before me like a small, pulsating secret. I turned it over in my hands again, tracing the edges, inhaling the scent once more. A soft breeze stirred from the slightly open window, carrying the distant sound of the village waking. A door slamming lightly down the street, the faint crow of a rooster, footsteps on cobblestones that were slick with morning dew. The world felt distant, softened by fog and quiet, as though it had paused to watch me with cautious patience. I broke the seal with care, trying not to tear the paper, and drew the folded sheet free. The ink was a dark brown, slightly smudged, where moisture had seeped in. I could feel the ridges of the pen strokes beneath my fingertips, raised against the surface like tiny rivers of intention. The words were familiar in tone, comforting, yet they tugged at something I couldn't place. A memory half remembered, a shadow of a feeling that I had thought long buried. I lingered over the first line, tasting the ink in my imagination like a flavor that had once belonged to a dream. We promised we would never forget. My heart caught. I sat back in my chair, staring at the paper, feeling the weight of those words pressing softly into my chest. They were gentle, but they demanded attention. A promise made decades ago, folded neatly into a letter and delivered across the years, now resting in my hands as if waiting for me to finally remember. The morning sunlight shifted slowly through the window, brushing the envelope and the table with thin gold streaks. Dust motes drifted in lazy spirals, catching the light and glowing faintly like tiny embers suspended in the air. The house seemed to lean inward, quiet, listening. I could hear the faint hum of the heating pipes, the soft groan of the floorboards beneath the table, and the occasional flutter of wings outside, birds adjusting to the morning light. Even the kettle, cold and still on the stove, seemed to pause in anticipation. I ran my fingers along the edges of the paper again, feeling the subtle grooves where the folds had been pressed over and over. I couldn't yet read the words fully, didn't yet have the courage to let them sink in completely. Instead, I let my eyes wander around the room, seeking grounding in the familiar. The chipped paint on the windowsill, the faint scar on the tabletop where someone had once carved initials, the stack of mismatched mugs by the sink, all reminders of a life lived slowly, carefully, patiently. Yet even in that familiarity, the letter felt intrusive, as though it belonged to another time entirely, another version of myself. My mind began to wander as I held the envelope. I thought about the village beyond the windows, the narrow streets shrouded in morning mist, the thatched rooftops slick with dew, smoke curling from chimneys. I imagined the villagers stirring quietly, observing from behind curtains, glances exchanged in silent conversation about things they never voiced aloud. Everyone had warned me about the well, about curiosity, about asking questions that might disturb the peace. Yet now, the letter made the warnings feel hollow, insufficient. It demanded engagement. Even as my own instincts hesitated, I could feel my pulse in my temples as I unfolded the sheet fully. The paper felt alive beneath my fingertips, almost trembling as I held it. Each word resonated like a faint echo inside my chest, pulling memories to the surface, memories I hadn't realized I had lost. I remembered laughter and sunlight, small hands brushing mine, voices whispering secrets into ears too young to fully understand. There were gaps, fragments, and half-shadows of faces I could no longer see clearly. Yet the letter hinted at them, guiding me slowly toward recognition, toward a truth long obscured. Outside, the fog began to lift slightly, sunlight piercing through in thin, hesitant beams. The village emerged in softened clarity, the cobblestones glistening, the edges of roofs outlined with dew, the skeletal trees casting long, delicate shadows. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying the faint scent of earth and grass. Even the distant hum of life, the creak of a gate, the faint murmur of a dog barking, the metallic clang of a distant shovel seemed magnified in the stillness of the morning. I lingered over the letter, unable to tear my eyes away. Each sentence pulled me deeper into a world I had only glimpsed in fragments of dreams and half-forgotten memories. The writing seemed to breathe, the ink alive, the folds holding space for emotions I could not yet name. I felt both exhilaration and trepidation, the delicate tension of knowing that something long hidden was now stirring, reaching out to me through paper, ink, and time itself. I finally allowed myself to read the first full paragraph aloud. In a whisper, "We have waited decades patiently for you to remember, for the day you could bear the weight of what has been kept in silence. The well has been empty for years only in appearance. Its secrets are waiting for you, as they have waited for generations." The words settled heavily over me. My hands trembled slightly, but I felt no fear, only an acute awareness, a stillness broken by the knowledge that everything I had been told, every warning, every whispered caution was incomplete. Something was waiting, something meant for me. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the weight of it sink in. My house, the village, the well itself, they all seemed to lean closer in the quiet, as if listening, as if confirming that this was indeed real and inevitable. And then, at last, I set the letter gently on the table, straightened in my chair, and let the full realization wash over me. I was about to step into a world of truths that had been hidden for decades. The morning light, the lingering fog, the scent of damp paper, all of it converged into one undeniable fact. The day my life would change had arrived, carried on the wings of a single, fragile letter. I left the house slowly, the letter still in my pocket, folded carefully so it wouldn't tear. The air outside was damp, thick with lingering fog that clung to my boots, curling around my ankles and seeping through the hem of my coat. Each step felt deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if walking toward the well had been choreographed long before I knew it. The village lay hushed, streets empty, houses half shrouded in mist. Roofs glistened with dew, chimneys releasing pale wisps of smoke that curled into the gray, blending seamlessly with the fog. Every sound was amplified in the silence. A distant crow, the soft metallic clink of a gate swinging on its hinges, the whisper of wind through skeletal trees. Even my footsteps, muffled against the damp cobblestones, sounded loud in the stillness, echoing faintly like a reminder that I was moving forward into something I could not yet fully understand. As I approached the edge of the village, I recalled the warnings I had been given so many times as a child. Don't go near the well. Nothing comes of it. The villagers spoke in hushed tones when they thought I wasn't listening, faces tight, eyes averted. I had always assumed it was superstition, a simple precaution for a child. But now, holding the letter close to my chest, I understood the weight behind those words. They were not just warnings, they were barriers. Shields were constructed to protect me from a truth that even the well itself had been waiting to reveal. The fog seemed to thicken as I neared the field, clinging to the grass and stone like a living thing. I slowed, noticing every detail. The way droplets hung from the tips of long blades of grass, each one reflecting the muted morning light. The texture of the path beneath my boots, soft with moss and damp earth. The way the mist swirled around the old fences, moving as though it had a memory of the children who had once played there. My breath came in slow, steady puffs, mist mingling with mist, until I wasn't sure where my body ended and the air began. The well appeared gradually from the gray, dark stone, emerging like a sentinel holding its secrets. I stopped a few paces away, taking in its form the circular stone rim worn smooth by decades of hands brushing against it, the faint moss clinging stubbornly in the cracks, the hollow darkness below. The air felt heavier here, pressing subtly against my chest, carrying a chill that seeped into my bones. I ran a hand along the rim, cold and damp, and a shiver traveled up my spine. I peered into the water, half expecting the usual emptiness. And then I saw it. A faint ripple, delicate and subtle, moving across the surface as though something beneath had stirred. My heart caught. For a moment, I thought it might be my imagination, a trick of the light reflecting off the morning mist. But no, there it was again, a tiny pulse, as though the water itself was breathing, waiting, acknowledging my presence. I knelt beside the well, fingertips brushing the stone, feeling its rough texture beneath my nails. The moss felt softer than expected, almost damp with something older than dew. I pressed my palm flat against the rim and closed my eyes, listening. The village seemed distant now, the fog isolating the well, the field, and me in a cocoon of expectation. I could hear the faint trickle of water somewhere below, though I knew the well had long been considered dry. And yet, the ripple persisted, subtle and persistent, like a heartbeat under the surface. Memories began to surface, half-formed and delicate. I remembered playing near this very spot as a child, hands brushing over stone, laughter echoing in the sun. Faces emerged in fragments, a woman bending down to whisper into my ear, a man's hand guiding me away from danger, and a child's tiny hand holding mine in trust. The memories were fragmented, incomplete, yet they carried an undeniable weight. I realized the well had been a silent witness to all of it, to joy, to sorrow, to secrets carefully hidden. I thought again of the warnings, of the villagers' quiet admonishments. It's nothing. It's empty. They were not lies, they were omissions, carefully curated fragments of truth intended to protect, to prevent me from stepping too close to what I was not ready to bear. And now, with the letter urging me forward, I felt both, the burden and the privilege of finally being allowed to witness it myself. I ran a hand over the water's surface, careful not to disturb it too abruptly. The ripple widened faintly, almost as if responding to my touch. I held my breath, counting silently, feeling the air thicken, the mist swirl closer. Light filtered through the fog in uneven shafts, catching on the water and glinting softly, casting faint, dancing reflections across my face. I felt as if I were staring not just into the well, but into a mirror of the past shapes, moments and memories folding over themselves beneath the surface. Time became slippery. Minutes stretched like hours. Each breath was measured, deliberate. I noticed the faint smell of moss and wet stone, the soft tang of the earth rising from the field. Tiny insects clung to the damp edges of the rim, invisible yet present, adding life to the stillness. A bird called from the trees, its cry distant, urgent, and I realized that even the forest seemed to acknowledge what I was seeing. The world outside had fallen silent to allow this moment to breathe. I thought about the hands that had touched a stone before me. Generations of people had leaned over the edge, perhaps searching for answers, for water, for comfort. And always they had been met with nothing, or so the village believed. But now, in the quiet dawn, with the letter pressing softly against my ribs, I could feel something different, something alive. The well had not been empty. It had waited, hidden beneath decades of expectation. It had kept something secret, something that belonged to me as much as it had belonged to anyone. The air felt thick with anticipation, and I could almost hear a faint hum, like a whispered exhale of the past. My hand traced small patterns on the stone, letting my fingers memorize its shape, its subtle irregularities, the places where moss clung thicker, the worn indentations left by long-past visitors. I could almost feel the echo of their presence, faintly vibrating through the stone and into my fingertips. And then I noticed something else. The water's surface reflected more than light. A shadow, delicate and fleeting, moving just beneath, as though someone or something was aware of my gaze. My chest tightened. I could feel my pulse in my temples, the steady rhythm of life underlined by an underlying current of something unspoken. I breathed slowly, deliberately, letting the tension settle into a quiet awareness. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the fog and damp and silence wash over me. Each memory, each echo, each fragment of history layered itself together in my mind. I realized, with a quiet ache of understanding, that the well had always been more than a stone circle. It had been a guardian, a keeper, a witness. And now, in this quiet dawn, it was offering me a glimpse of what it had held for decades. I opened my eyes and leaned closer, peering into the water again. The ripple remained, subtle and rhythmic, as though acknowledging that I had finally come, finally recognized its presence. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched. And in that watching, I felt the first real shift in understanding. The well was not empty. It never had been. And the moment I realized it, a shiver ran down my spine, not fear, but recognition. The ripple widened slightly, faint waves radiating outward. The air felt charged with quiet energy, as if the fog, the stone, the water, and the earth itself had been waiting for this acknowledgement. My heart beat steadily, slowly, a measured rhythm that matched a subtle pulsing of the surface beneath me. I stayed there for what felt like hours, though I could not measure time. I watched the reflections shift, the fog swirl, the sunlight stretch thin beams across the water, dust motes dancing in quiet celebration. Every detail, the rough texture of the rim, the damp smell of moss, the faint hum of life in the forest was magnified. Every memory of the village, every warning whispered by neighbors long gone or too careful to speak, every fragment of my own childhood, everything converged in this single, quiet revelation. I ran my fingers along the stone one last time before standing. I pressed my palms to my chest, feeling the weight of anticipation, curiosity, and history all mingled together. One deep breath, another. The fog began to lift slightly, revealing more of the village behind me, more of the field ahead. But I did not look away from the well. Not yet. A gentle wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and rain-soaked grass. The ripple persisted, subtle, like the pulse of a secret long kept. I whispered quietly, almost to myself, "I see you. I understand. I am here." And in that moment, I felt it, the past reaching out, delicate and insistent, inviting me to step fully into its embrace. I left the well reluctantly, the ripple still echoing faintly in my mind. The fog had begun to thin, but the field remained hushed, each blade of grass glistening with dew like tiny mirrors reflecting a sky I could barely see. My boots pressed against the damp earth, each step deliberate, each breath measured. The letter in my pocket seemed heavier now, its presence pulsing against my chest as though it held its own heartbeat. I had a sense, sudden and insistent, that the path ahead required more than curiosity, it demanded courage. The historian's house came into view, modest and worn, its walls a faded yellow, windows streaked with age. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney, curling into the sky as if reluctant to leave. I knocked softly, and the door creaked open before I could summon words. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper, polished wood, and dust. Shelves lined every wall, weighed down with ledgers, journals, and boxes that had seen decades pass silently. Each spine was a promise of knowledge, each page a hidden witness to lives that had existed quietly alongside mine. He did not smile. His eyes, sharp and deliberate, assessed me without judgment. "You went to the well," he said quietly. Not a question, more an acknowledgement, a fact he had been expecting me to confirm. I nodded, unable to speak, aware of the weight of the moment. He motioned toward the small wooden table by the window. I followed, stepping lightly, the floorboards groaning softly beneath my boots. He poured tea, the porcelain clinking faintly in the stillness. "You've found something," he said, voice low and deliberate. "Not everything is as it seems. The village believes the well is empty, that it has been for decades. But appearances deceive." I sat down, hands folded tightly in my lap, the warmth of the teacup grounding me in the moment. He placed a journal in front of me, its spine worn and brittle. "Some things are kept hidden not for malice, but for patience," he said. "Memories, promises, choices, they wait for the right eyes, the right time. Perhaps now is that moment." I reached for the journal tentatively. The leather was rough under my fingers, the pages fragile. As I turned the first few sheets, words scrolled across them in neat, deliberate script, detailing events that had been carefully preserved. Names of villagers, long-forgotten interactions, promises made in whispers. I felt a shiver creep down my spine. Each line seemed to speak not just of history, but of intention, of choices made quietly, invisibly, shaping lives without recognition. He leaned back slightly, watching me without speaking. "The well," he said finally, "has always held more than water. It has been a guardian, a witness, a keeper of what cannot be spoken aloud." My heart tightened as I absorbed his words. I could feel the weight of decades pressing on my chest, the knowledge that what had been hidden from me was now being entrusted. I realized the villagers had been protecting not just their own secrets, but mine as well. That the well had waited patiently for me to be ready. He retrieved a small wooden box from a shelf and placed it carefully on the table before me. Its surface was smooth, polished by hands I would never know. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the latch. Inside, objects wrapped in cloth awaited. A rusted locket, faintly engraved. A ribbon faded from sunlight. Photographs curling at the edges. Each item was imbued with time, with the subtle scent of history, with the faint pulse of lives once lived. I picked up the locket first, turning it over in my hand. The metal was cool, surprisingly heavy, and the engraving, tiny letters worn smooth, spoke of names and dates I could not yet place. I felt a strange intimacy with these objects, as if holding them allowed me to connect to moments that had otherwise been lost. Each item carried a story, a fragment of memory, a whisper of intention that demanded acknowledgement. Next, I unfolded the letters. The paper was delicate, fibers soft with age, ink faded but legible. The handwriting varied, some familiar, some strange, but all carried the same tone, deliberate, patient, awaiting the moment I could understand. I read slowly, carefully, letting each word sink into my chest. Names, places, promises, confessions. The letters were a conversation across decades, a bridge connecting the past to the present. I realized the well had not been empty. It had been filled with intention, with care, with the weight of lives and choices too precious or dangerous to reveal prematurely. Each object, Each letter, each memory preserved was a testament to patience, to trust, to hope that one day the right person would come to witness what had been hidden. The historian spoke again, softly, almost a whisper. The village has always believed in silence. Some truths are too heavy to speak aloud, but now you hold them, and with them, a responsibility. Not to reveal, but to remember. Not to change, but to understand. I sat back, letting the weight of it all settle. The room seemed to lean closer, the light through the window warmer, dust motes catching in its beams. Each item in the box, each word on the page, each memory stirring within me was a thread in a tapestry I was only now beginning to see. The well had been a guardian, yes, but so had the villagers, each careful omission and gentle warning a layer of protection until I could carry the knowledge. I touched the letters again, one by one, tracing the ink, feeling the fibers. There was urgency here, yes, but also patience, a deliberate pacing to the revelations, allowing me to uncover, understand, and bear witness without being overwhelmed. The objects and writings spoke of love, of choices made in shadows, of sacrifices, invisible to all but those who had created them. Hours passed, though I did not notice. The sun moved slowly across the sky, casting long, golden shafts of light through the window, illuminating the dust and the letters, highlighting the edges of the objects. Shadows shifted and stretched, echoing the past that lingered in the room. With me, I could feel the heartbeat of generations beneath my fingertips, alive in the silence, pulsing softly in rhythm with my own. The historian did not rush me. He watched with quiet patience, understanding the delicate nature of revelation. Some stories, he said finally, do not ask for attention. They wait quietly until they are ready to be known. And sometimes only certain people are allowed to see. I felt tears prick my eyes, though I did not move to wipe them. Not sadness, not relief. Something quieter, recognition, a connection to lives and decisions I had never known, to people I had never met, yet who had shaped the world I now inhabited. I understood at that moment that the well had not simply held water. It had held memory, intention, and the power of choice. I carefully returned each item to the box, reverence in every movement. The letters folded, the ribbon laid gently atop photographs, the locket placed precisely where it had been found. The box itself seemed heavier now, imbued with the acknowledgement that I had seen, that I had understood, that I had been trusted. As I stood to leave, the historian spoke one last time, softly, as though imparting a final blessing. The past is patient. It waits for those who are ready. Do not rush what must remain slow. Listen, watch, remember. I stepped outside into the fading fog, the letter still in my pocket, the box heavy. In my mind, though not in my hands. The field lay before me, well silent but waiting. The air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of moss and earth, of rain long past and dew freshly settled. I walked slowly, deliberately, each step echoing softly against the damp soil. The ripple in the water came back to me, subtle and persistent, as though acknowledging the moment I had experienced in the historian's house. I understood finally that the well's secrets were not simply objects or letters. They were intention, patience, and love folded carefully across decades, waiting for someone who could hold them without breaking, and I knew quietly that I was the one it had been waiting for. I walked slowly through the village, the box of objects and letters still pressing softly against my chest and memory, though not in my hands. The fog had lifted slightly, and the streets now revealed themselves with faint clarity, glistening cobblestones, worn rooftops, chimneys exhaling small clouds of smoke. Each house seemed alive, as if observing me, leaning slightly forward in the morning light. My steps were careful, quiet, but each one felt heavy with anticipation. I approached Mrs. Holloway first, her small cottage tucked behind climbing ivy and a low, sagging fence. She was in the garden, bent over her roses, hands moving slowly among the blooms, her posture deliberate, measured. The scent of wet soil and flowers mingled with the crisp morning air, and for a moment I hesitated, unsure how to begin. She looked up, eyes narrowing slightly as she recognized me. "Clara," she said, voice soft but carrying the weight of years. Her hands paused in the soil. "You've gone to the well." I nodded slowly, unsure what else to say. The letter in my pocket felt suddenly heavier, as if it had been waiting for this acknowledgement. She did not look away, nor did she frown. Instead, she gestured for me to come closer, the motion small but deliberate. "We did what we thought was best," she said. "Some things are too dangerous to be seen too soon. You have to understand that, child." I listened quietly, nodding, letting her words settle. They were not reprimands, nor warnings, they were confessions. I felt the layers of years pressing softly against me, the weight of protection, secrecy, and care. "I understand," I said finally, voice low. "I see now." She smiled faintly, though not fully, as though relief and apprehension were mingled in her expression. "It was always meant for you to find. In time, not before." I walked on, past the empty square, past the bakery where faint traces of bread still lingered in the warm air, to Mr. Carver's house. He was sitting on his porch, hands folded, eyes observing the street with quiet vigilance. His face was lined with decades of experience, caution etched into every crease. "The well isn't what people think," he said, before I had the chance to speak. I nodded again. "I've seen it. I understand what was kept there." He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping to a whisper. "Some stories, they don't belong to the living. Not fully. Some truths are safer left in silence." "I don't want to disturb them," I said softly. "I only want to know, to remember." He studied me for a long moment, then exhaled, a faint tremor in his hands. "The well has been patient," he said, "and now it has found someone who can be patient too." The villagers' warnings, their hushed voices, the secrecy that had seemed suffocating as a child, all of it made sense now. It was not fear. It was care. Each omission, each carefully chosen word, each glance exchanged behind closed doors had been a part of a careful orchestration to protect a fragile truth until I could bear it. I found myself wandering slowly through the village, observing details I had never truly seen before. The chipped paint on a doorway, the curl of ivy climbing a wall, the faint marks of a child's hand on a fence post. Each fragment of observation felt like a memory waiting to be reclaimed. Each face I passed carried its own shadow of history, its own unspoken acknowledgement that the past had been carefully curated. I returned to the well, carrying the awareness of the villagers' silent cooperation with me. I knelt once more at the rim, fingertips brushing against the cool, damp stone. The water rippled faintly beneath me, gentle and insistent, reflecting light in tiny, dancing fragments. I traced patterns in the reflections, allowing my mind to reconstruct the lives intertwined with this place. There were stories of love quietly expressed, sacrifices made without recognition, promises whispered to the earth and water rather than to human ears. The letters, the objects, the ripple, all of it converged into clarity. I could see the intentionality behind each act of preservation, the weight of history held carefully, patiently. The locket, the ribbon, the photographs, they were not simply items. They were vessels of memory, symbols of trust, reminders of responsibility. And now, with the villagers' unspoken guidance and the historian's quiet mentorship, I understood that my role was not to expose these things, but to witness, to hold them gently in my awareness, and to honor the careful patience of those who had come before me. I remembered my own childhood, fleeting memories surfacing with startling clarity. A hand brushing mine near this very well. A whispered warning carried in the hush of evening air. A small ribbon tied around a wrist long ago. Faded but never forgotten. These fragments, once ephemeral, now felt tangible, rooted in the soil, stone, and water that had surrounded me all my life. The well, the village, the objects, they were threads weaving me into a history I had never known but had always belonged to. I stood slowly, letting my gaze sweep across the village. Each face, each home, each shadow of memory was connected to the others. A tapestry of intention, silence, and care. The fog had lifted further, revealing the edges of fields, the outline of the forest, and the quiet movement of life resuming its ordinary rhythm. Yet beneath the ordinary, I could feel the presence of the past, layered and persistent, guiding me, waiting for recognition. I held my hands out, palms resting gently on the stone rim, and whispered softly, "I understand. I see you. I will carry this." The ripple responded faintly, moving across the surface in a delicate pulse, acknowledging my vow. It was subtle, imperceptible to anyone but me, yet it felt monumental. The well had entrusted me, as had the villagers, as had the objects and letters waiting patiently in the historian's care. The village seemed to exhale in quiet relief, a collective acknowledgement passing through doors, walls, and the thin air itself. Mrs. Holloway waved from her garden, small and deliberate. Mr. Carver nodded faintly from his porch. Even the distant barking of a dog seemed softened, careful, respectful of the moment. I understood finally that the village had been orchestrating a delicate dance for decades, one that only I was meant to complete. I lingered there for hours, tracing memories, breathing in the damp air, listening to the faint whisper of wind through the trees, the subtle hum of life in the distance. Each detail, each sensation, reinforced the truth I was beginning to carry. The well was never empty. It had been patient, as had the villagers, as had the past itself, waiting for someone capable of understanding, for someone who could honor it with quiet reverence. As I walked back toward the center of the village, my chest felt lighter yet fuller, burdened yet honored. The objects, the letters, the ripple, the shadows of history, they were now mine to hold in memory, not in possession, not to expose, but to remember. The village had taught me patience, observation, and humility. The well had revealed intention, care, and the delicate weight of secrecy. And I, in turn, understood that revelation need not be allowed to be complete. I glanced back one last time at the well, now resting quietly beneath the morning sun. The letters and objects were not with me, yet they were present in my awareness. The ripple had ceased for a moment, stilling as if to give me space to leave, but the memory of it persisted, vibrating softly in my mind and chest. I whispered again, quietly, reverently, "I see you. I will remember." And with that, I walked slowly home, the village alive yet hushed around me. The fog lifted, but the echoes of patience lingering in the air. I carried within me the delicate understanding of lives, promises, and history intertwined, ready to step fully into the next chapter of the story the well had been waiting to reveal. I returned to the well before sunrise, the air still thick with the residue of night. Mist clung to the grass, curling around my ankles like a quiet, breathing thing. Each step was measured, deliberate, my boots pressing softly into the damp earth. The world was hushed, as if holding its breath for what was about to happen. Even the village behind me seemed paused, shadows stretching from the rooftops like careful witnesses. The well emerged slowly from the fog, dark stone softened by dew, rim glistening faintly in the faint light. I knelt beside it, hands resting lightly on the cool surface, feeling the moss cling damp and soft beneath my fingers. The water reflected the earliest threads of dawn, silver and fragile, trembling with the faintest pulse. And then I saw it, the ripple, subtle but persistent, moving as though the well itself had remembered me. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly, letting the fog, the chill, and the anticipation wash over me. Every detail, the rough texture of stone, the scent of damp earth, the faint chorus of awakening birds was amplified in this quiet morning. Memories layered themselves in my mind, fragments of voices, hands, faces, promises whispered decades ago, now aligning with clarity. I understood finally the depth of patience the well had demanded, the careful orchestration of history that had led me here. The sun began to rise, faint beams piercing the mist, illuminating the water in slivers of gold and silver. I let my hands trail lightly along the rim, tracing patterns in the stone, letting my fingers memorize every crack, every worn edge. The ripple responded subtly, acknowledging my presence, affirming that the secrets I had uncovered were meant to be held, not exposed. My chest felt tight, heavy with recognition, yet light with understanding. I whispered softly, almost to myself, "I see you. I understand. I will remember." The words were carried away gently by the dawn breeze, mingling with the scent of wet earth and morning air. I could feel the layers of history settling around me, a gentle embrace of past, present, and memory, intertwined. The well had waited patiently, the villagers had guided silently, and the historian had lent quiet stewardship. Everything had been preparing me for this moment. The ripple widened faintly, like a heartbeat, as if the well itself acknowledged the completion of a silent pact. I traced the reflection of the sky on the water, watching the light change, dancing across my face in soft, deliberate patterns. The fog thinned further, revealing the edges of the field, the outline of trees, and the distant rooftops of the village, all bathed in the first golden rays of dawn. A sense of quiet release settled over me, a gentle closing of a chapter I had only just begun to understand. I stayed kneeling, letting the ripple and the reflection carry me through memory and recognition. The objects, letters, and history I had held in my mind formed a constellation of understanding, deliberate, patient, and deeply human. The well had never been empty, it had been alive with intention, love, and trust, waiting for the right person to bear witness. And now, I was that person. Slowly I rose, letting my gaze sweep across the field one last time. Every blade of grass, every droplet of dew, every subtle shift in mist seemed alive, attuned to my presence. I felt the weight of history, not as a burden, but as a quiet honor. I touched the rim of the well gently, a gesture of reverence and acknowledgement. The ripples softened, almost imperceptibly, and I felt a profound sense of closure settle over me. I turned back toward the village, each step deliberate, carrying with me the understanding that secrets, patience, and care had shaped everything I had experienced. The morning light illuminated my path, soft and unwavering, and I breathed deeply, tasting the cool air, the faint scent of earth, and the subtle warmth of first sunlight on my skin. The well had given me its truth, and I in turn would carry it gently, silently, and faithfully. Before leaving entirely, I whispered once more, as if addressing the well itself, "I will remember. I will honor what has been hidden. I will carry it with care." The words lingered, soft and unbroken, merging with the faint hum of the village awakening, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the quiet exhalation of the morning. And as I walked slowly back toward the village, the sun climbing steadily, I realized something remarkable. Life here had always been patient, quiet, and deliberate. It had waited for me to be ready. And now, in the hush of dawn, I felt the profound, delicate satisfaction of understanding, of belonging, and of being entrusted with a secret that had waited generations to be seen. I left the well behind, but it stayed with me, alive in memory, in understanding, in every quiet moment of the village. Waking around me, secrets had waited decades, patience had held firm, and now I carried it all not to reveal, but to remember. The mist had lifted, the sun climbed slowly, and I understood that some truths are not meant to be shouted, only held delicately, like the pulse of water beneath a well, waiting for the right person to finally see. And I had been ready, they said. The well was empty, but now I knew the truth. And one day, perhaps, you will understand it too.